usually told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
No, breakfast is not necessary. In fact, there are many studies that have shown that a lot of people can benefit from avoiding food first thing in the morning. Breakfast can actually set people up for failure.
What are some of the unique insights that people don't know about the keto diet?
It's actually not just a diet, it's a powerful therapeutic strategy that has been used as medicine to reverse obesity and diabetes for over 200 years. The overwhelming scientific evidence, Shlloka, has showed that people who do this approach tend to lose weight without even realizing it because this diet reduces hunger. Low protein intake has an anti-cancer effect. The data that shows that high protein intake causes any form of cancer. If you eat a low protein diet, that can cause potential issues around muscle mass. And one of the most important predictors if someone not only lives a long period of time, but actually has a functional high quality life is maintaining muscle mass. Would you want to live to 120 years of age if you were frail and couldn't move for 60 of those years? Think about that.
Dr. Andrew Koutnik, PhD, the king of keto, is an award-winning scientist who has conducted the world's longest research on the ketogenic diet. Having collaborated with leading institutions such as NASA, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and the US Department of Defense, his work focuses on translating cutting-edge science into real-world actionable strategies for health and disease management.
There's no metabolic benefit to having one large meal that's, let's say, 2,000 calories versus 4 meals that are each 500 calories. It's going to have the same metabolic effect on the body. When you have a lot of sodium loss or salt loss, it's called a diuretic effect. It's important to consume somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 milligrams of sodium while on the diet. Food companies are not here to make you healthy. Food companies are here to trick you. They want to trick you to consume as much food as possible of their product. They want you to buy more of it because that makes them more money.
What about millet flours? They're almost zero gluten.
Millet has a lot of carbohydrates in it. And so those carbohydrates, even though it is a healthy food, will still convert over to sugar and still cause a glucose elevation and an insulin elevation. There's a study that came out 2 days ago that had showed that you can actually do the ketogenic diet and actually put 88% of the patients with moderate to severe depression into remission. So they no longer had clinical signs of depression. Their anxiety reduced. So one of the key things is to ensure that you're getting good sleep. Going outside and getting sunlight is one of the best ways to ensure that your body hormone and 24-hour window is aligned with light and dark cycles.
Living with type 1 diabetes himself, Dr. Koutnik uniquely blends personal experience with rigorous research to help individuals understand how nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle truly impact the body. We're delighted and honored to welcome Dr. Koutnik for the very first time on the Body To Beiing podcast. Did you know that the keto diet is a 200-year-old diet? And long before it became popular for weight loss, it was used to treat a variety of health conditions that are still very common today. Today we have with us one of the leading experts on the ketogenic diet, whom I call the king of keto, Dr. Andrew Koutnik, and he is going to be guiding us through a masterclass on the ketogenic diet. Before we begin, I have a little request. If you think our content adds value, please do subscribe to the channel because unfortunately, 80% of our viewers don't. Namaskaram and greetings, Dr. Andrew Koutnik. Welcome to the Body To Beiing podcast.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
First off, it is truly a privilege to be interviewing a researcher of your stature. You've conducted the longest study on the ketogenic diet spanning 10 years. And it's needless to say that there's no one better than you to be speaking of a diet which is, I presume, the most popular diets across the world. And I'm especially grateful because you've agreed to do this in the masterclass format, which is offer our viewers a step-by-step ketogenic diet plan morning to night in the most practical, sustainable, and the scientific way. So thank you so much.
Honor. I'm happy to do it. I think it's very important for people to understand how to do this the right way.
Right. So my first question to you is, what are some of the unique insights that people don't know about the keto diet?
One of the most important things people don't appreciate about this diet is it's actually a not just a diet, it's a powerful therapeutic strategy, one that has been used as medicine to reverse obesity and diabetes for over 200 years. So imagine you have a car and it has two different sources of fuel, one sugar and one's fat. And most of the time, the body is burning the sugar. And the sugar comes from foods like rice, wheat, or atta, or things like naan or roti, pasta, noodles, bread, grains like millet. And when you eat these foods, the body turns this into a sugar. And the sugar works very fast, but runs out quickly. Can sometimes make you feel a little tired, hungry, cranky. But the ketogenic diet really teaches your body to go from this sugar fuel in the body to a source of energy called fat as fuel. What this does is it reduces the amount of sugar in the body, and the body starts shifting towards the other fuel, the fat. And you have these tiny fuel helpers called ketone bodies. And fat plus ketones together work as a steady energy, like a slow burning campfire instead of a quick match.
Mhm. So, who would an ideal candidate be for the keto diet?
So when we think about people that it could benefit most, individuals who are looking to maybe lose weight. So it's been used for things like obesity and various forms of diabetes, including type 1 and type 2 diabetes. We also know that it can be very powerful for, as we spoke about, epilepsy, but other neurological disorders. As individuals age, they're worried about their cognitive function. So cognitive decline is something that every person as they age is concerned about. And it's been shown to be effective for early stages of cognitive decline or Alzheimer's. We also know diseases of the liver and kidney can also benefit from these strategies. The liver seems to benefit because of the reduction in insulin. The kidneys seem to benefit from the increased production of ketone bodies. But we also know there's an emergence of evidence that shows that it can be very powerful for psychiatric conditions in the brain, like depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder. While that is very new and emergent evidence, it's showing quite consistently its ability to affect various tissues in a positive manner. This is a diet that has been around for well over 200 years, but it's been used as a medicine for also 200 years. So if someone wants to do this diet just to feel better or lose weight, have sustained energy, this is why most people, in fact, the vast majority of people, try a ketogenic diet.
So, if you had to take us through a morning to night routine, a diet plan, how would it look like? Let's start with the morning.
Okay, so let's say that someone were to begin their morning day. And when we think about those type of foods, oftentimes we're thinking about foods like, let's say, meats, fishes, cheese or paneers, chicken, lamb, goat, pork, as one of the primary forms of protein. If someone were to be considering this for, let's say, they're vegan or vegetarian, they may be considering other foods like Greek yogurt, curd, cheeses, tofu, tempeh, hemp, pumpkin, chia seeds, things like nutritional yeast, all can be a supportive part of a protein source. But with protein, you also want to have some type of fibrous vegetable. So a form of vegetable that is high in fiber content. So the type of vegetables that typically would match that is spinach, like palak or Swiss chard, lettuce, collard greens, celery, broccoli, asparagus, cabbage. These are typical foods that make up the fibrous vegetable component of a well-formulated ketogenic diet. But then you also need to think about the fat source, because fat is now the predominant source of energy on this diet. And one of the common forms of fat on this diet can be what comes along with the protein. So if you think about ground beef or paneer or cheese or eggs, they all have natural forms of fat in them that help make up a healthy fat source on this diet. But if you were to add additional fat, you may be considering things like coconut or ghee or butter as other forms of fat sources on this diet. And you can really think of an array of different foods that you can make, like palak paneer or various other food strategies that can easily just make up a protein, fibrous vegetable, and fat.
So, if I wake up in the morning, what is the first thing that I should be consuming if I were to start with the drinks? What are the drinks that I could consume and what are the things that I should stay away from?
So when we think about beverages or liquid foods or calories. Obviously, people can consume water, but you can also have things like mineral water or carbonated water, so long as it doesn't have sugar in it. You can have chai tea, so long as you're not adding things like sugar or milk. But you can do alternatives. You can include unsweetened almond milk or unsweetened coconut milk, and you can include things like heavy cream as well. But you can have various forms of tea. You can also have coffee as well with the same type of additives. Again, these are common things that people are going to consume in the morning as far as beverages. But you can also have unsweetened almond milk or coconut milk. And so long as it's key to not have added sugars. If someone wants to add additional flavor to these drinks, which is common to include things like milk and sugar into things like a chai tea, you can do so with unsweetened almond milk and include things like stevia, monk fruit, or allulose to give it a sweet flavor without all the metabolic consequences. However, you want to avoid certain types of drinks in the morning, like regular milk or things with added sugar. Sugar sodas, sports drinks, sweet fruit drinks, typically in packaged form.
A lot of us consume honey water first thing in the morning, or let's say coconut water. Is that a problem?
So honey has a lot of sugar in it. Now, honey is a healthy food. There's nothing wrong with honey, but if you want to make sure that glucose is low and insulin's low, you want to limit the amount of honey consumed on this diet. But you can replicate a lot of that sweet flavor in these drinks by just having some type of fat source and like coconut and adding some type of healthy sweetener that comes from natural sources like stevia, monk fruit, or allulose, which all come from fruits and plants, but don't have the metabolic consequences of the high sugar loads that adding pure sugar or other foods like, let's say, honey may have with them.
Or jaggery for that matter. Coconut sugar, palm sugar, these are a no-no?
Correct. All these forms of sugar ultimately are going to act similarly. So we know that honey has a lot of positive benefits to it, but it's not so much the sugar that's positive, it's the other components of honey, the micronutrients, the phytonutrients that come with honey, that is beneficial. The sugar, not so much, but you can get a lot of those positive components from other food sources that are naturally forming alternatives to add sweetness to those foods.
What are some ketogenic diet breakfast options that you could suggest?
So when thinking about breakfast, a lot of times people may think of, let's say, at least here in America, they'll think about oatmeal, but you can replace oats for things like hemp seeds, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, and that can really be a replacement for things like oats. A lot of people will consume eggs in the morning as part of breakfast, and that's completely consistent with a ketogenic diet. You can definitely consume things like eggs first thing in the morning, and that can make up a breakfast source. But if someone is interested in other forms of foods, let's say like beans, they can consume foods like lupini beans, which are a form of bean that have high protein, high fiber, but very little carbohydrate. So it can be a great alternative for some of these other forms of food that people typically consume in the morning.
Right. But no breads, right? No carbs.
Correct. You want to avoid breads, grains, sugar, or foods or drinks that have additional sugar loads in them. You can have things like Greek yogurt in the morning, cheeses, tofu, tempeh, again, the hemp, pumpkin, chia seeds that we spoke about. If you have a meal that has nutritional yeast, these are all completely consistent with a ketogenic diet and can be consumed on a ketogenic diet without any issue. And there's also alternatives. If someone wants to wake up and have some type of sweet food, you can make almost any food compatible with the ketogenic diet. And there are many common forms of food, which I'm going to mispronounce some of these, but let's say gulab janam, if I'm saying that correctly.
Jamun.
These type of foods, you can swap out the kind of koya, I think it's called, milk solids, mata, sugar syrups, and you can replace those with things like almond flour, paneer, or cream cheese. You can fry it in ghee, and instead of using syrups or sugars, you can add allulose or monk fruit with that. And this can give it kind of a soft, rich, syrupy without the sugar spikes, the insulin spikes. You can take foods like rasgula, you can replace the things like the sugar syrup in this. You'd still have the paneer in it, but you would replace the syrup for allulose and water. You might lightly squeeze some lemon juice for just some texture and additional flavor. Or you can take jalebi, am I saying that correctly? Which
Jalebi, yes.
yeah, there you go. And you have you can take out things like the refined flour batter, the deep fry, the sugar syrups. You can replace them with almond flour or psyllium husk, yogurt for fermented flavors. You can fry it with ghee, and you can again replace these sugars and syrups with things like allulose, monk fruit, and saffron. And this is crisp, chewy insides without the carbohydrates. And you really can take almost any major food that someone consumes and think, oh, I love these foods. I want to have them. And I normally have them on this diet. You can essentially, with all the tools we have available to us, especially artificial intelligence, and go to these tools and say, this is the foods that I eat every day, but I need to make it consistent with a ketogenic diet. And it will give you rapid swaps in things like milk, sugar, rice, potatoes, and give you alternative food strategies that allow you to stay low sugar, low insulin, maintain these metabolic benefits of this diet without having the consequences of these higher sugar foods, which have caused most of the major metabolic health consequences like obesity and excess body fat gain or diabetes, which are unfortunately much more common.
Right. What about millet flours? Because in our part of the world, we do consume a lot of millets. They're almost zero gluten. They have low sugar. They have low carbs. So does that work? Like maybe ragi, finger millet flour, or jawar, bajra, pearl millet. Does that work?
So millet has a lot of carbohydrates in it. And so those carbohydrates, even though it is a healthy food, will still convert over to sugar and still cause a glucose elevation and an insulin elevation. So you can really replace things like millet, but also potatoes and yams, corns, oats, for things like cauliflower, radishes. You can replace things like green peas, which again are healthy foods, but can swap them out for things like snap peas, whole grain mung dal, or black urad dal. You can replace a lot of the beans, legumes, lentils that people consume, and preference lupini beans, which are a really healthy form of bean that's consistent with a ketogenic diet. You can replace things like quinoa with chia seeds, hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, and you can get a lot of these same type of foods and benefits by just picking foods that are less sugar, going to cause less insulin spike in the body, and help support individuals who are trying to lose weight, trying to have more sustained energy, and not have those up and down glucose and insulin spikes throughout the day.
Kidney beans, does that work?
Kidney beans are going to be higher in the carbohydrate range, just like chickpeas will as well. And so you want to avoid those type of foods that have higher carbohydrate content and less fiber.
What are some of the ketogenic snack options that you could recommend?
So typical snacks on a ketogenic diet are foods that aren't going to cause you to feel hungry. They're going to satisfy your craving and ultimately make you feel less hungry. And so you can consume things like nuts and cheeses as healthy alternatives. I always encourage people when they're looking for a snack to focus on a protein snack, because protein, unlike carbohydrates and fat, is very effective at not just supporting muscle mass, but it also helps reduce hunger in the diet. And so that can be very effective for people who are looking for something to blunt that hunger, because instead of making a poor choice in their food and going off the diet, they are able to consume something that makes them feel nourished. It helps supports their muscle and their muscle growth, but also makes them not feel hungry. And I think that that's incredibly important for many people. So if you can choose foods that have higher protein content in them, that can be incredibly effective. And the more whole foods, the more natural those foods are, the less packaged and refined the food is, meaning the food has been processed through multiple different steps and you get this package of food. That packaged food oftentimes has been processed to taste incredibly good, but then triggers your brain to overconsume. And that is not helpful for you if you're trying to feel better, keep your total food focus on health, reducing sugar, reducing insulin impacts in the body. And so you want to focus on whole foods, you want to focus on protein-based foods, but you can have things like seeds, nuts, cheeses as snacks on this diet, and they're totally compatible with a health-focused diet of any type of diet, not just a ketogenic diet, but these are all healthy foods on any diet.
Right. Okay. What about some dinner options?
So a lot of dinner options are going to be focused on typically probably a protein source. Let's say maybe a beef, a lamb, goat, chicken, cheese, again, paneer, but you could also have blue cheese, cheddar cheese, goat cheese, Swiss cheese. Any of these can make up a dinner-based option. Or if you are a vegetarian, you can still do cheeses. But if you're vegan, you can do foods like tofus or tempehs, lupini beans, again, the hemp, pumpkin, chia seeds, and also include often things like nutritional yeast in them. And these can make up the protein source. And I don't want to forget to mention things like fish. You can do tuna, salmon, shrimp, shellfish. As long as you don't have any allergies to these foods, they can make up the protein source. But then you want to also include one of the green leafy vegetable components that we spoke about, like palak or spinach, Swiss chard, lettuce, collard greens, celery, broccoli, and many others. But I also want to mention these other options as well, because some people may not only want to have green leafy vegetables, maybe they want to have green beans, eggplant, Brussels sprouts, snap peas, sauerkraut, bell peppers, some types of squash as well, like spaghetti squash, can also be included, and tomatoes and onions. These are all consistent with the diet. And you can make up really any meal that you would normally eat with these food options. And oftentimes people don't realize this, Shlloka, that many of the foods they're already consuming are already consistent with eating a healthy ketogenic diet. But what people should be focused on is eliminating the foods that actually are not benefiting them, are actually causing them to have increased glucose levels in the blood, increased insulin levels in the blood, and eliminating those, which you probably should be eliminating on virtually any diet anyways, and really focusing on the health-focused diet. And those are the type of foods that people benefit and do really well on, and should be the focus, I would believe, of most of these diets. So let's say if we were to take someone through like a typical breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. So let's say someone would do, let's say, paneer or egg, gir ghee, if I'm saying that correctly. You can cook that in ghee. That can be paneer or eggs, onions, tomatoes, and just a decent amount. You can have ginger, garlic, turmeric, cumin, chili, cooked in ghee or butter. You can also have, if you wanted to, an optional side of something like coconut chutney, but without the sugar. And if you want that sweet flavor, you can add stevia, monk fruit, or allulose as the sweetness. And this works well because it's high protein, high fat, but also very low in carbohydrates. Then when someone gets to their lunch-based meal, maybe they would want to do something like a chicken curry with cauliflower rice. So let's say you did like a bone-in chicken thigh cooked in ghee or coconut oil, a small amount of tomatoes, spices like garam masala, coriander, turmeric, with cauliflower rice sauteed in ghee with cumin. And again, if you wanted an optional side, you could do like cucumber radia, which is full-fat yogurt in a small portion. And again, this is a very consistent diet with a ketogenic diet. We talked about snacks earlier, but maybe someone would do like paneer tikka or boiled eggs or nuts or some other form of food. But paneer and boiled eggs have higher protein content. So you could have paneer cubes grilled in pan-fried ghee, or 2 boiled eggs with like salt and chili, and maybe a handful of peanuts or almonds on the side as well, because it's portable. It means you can take it with you where you go. It's going to make you feel full, so you're not constantly craving more food. Typically, these are common foods that people enjoy. Now, let's say you shift to dinner. Let's say you're getting to the end of the day. You're thinking about, what should I consume at dinner time? Maybe you choose a fish or mutton curry with stir-fried vegetables. So think, a fish source that you like to cook. You could cook that in mustard oil, coconut oil, ginger, garlic, or turmeric, stir-fried in things like cabbage, spinach, or cauliflower, or one of these other vegetables we spoke about that are compatible with a low sugar, higher fiber content vegetable. And again, avoiding the roti or rice. And why this works so well is it's, a traditional dinner, it's protein and fat heavy, but it has low glucose impacts. So that means low insulin impacts. And let's say that they wanted to have beverages with one of these meals. Maybe they'll do masala chai without the sugar. Again, you could do the allulose, stevia, monk fruit. And you can include coconut or heavy cream if you wish, but you can do the same thing with any form of tea or coffee. And of course, obviously, the best option of all of them, besides maybe an unsugar or unsweetened form of tea, is water. And these work because they're simply focusing on protein, low carbohydrate based foods, and allowing for the fat to come along with the protein based foods, or they add fat in the form of coconut or ghee for flavor. So like egg, paneer, chicken, curry, ghee, vegetables, and spices, but just without the things like rice, roti, and sugar as a part of that food.
Does the quantity matter? And if so, how much?
Yes, it does, because if you consume any type of food in excess, it can cause you to potentially gain weight. So really, when someone's primary focus may be to lose weight, shed the fat on their body, start feeling better, the thing you want to focus on is a protein-focused diet with foods that don't spike glucose and insulin. So low glucose, low carbohydrate forms of vegetables, and fat sources that typically come along with the protein. And if you do this, the overwhelming scientific evidence, Shlloka, has showed that people who do this approach tend to lose weight without even realizing it. So if someone wants to eat this diet to help them lose weight or feel better, or let's say they have one of these conditions we mentioned that they want to improve, one of the most powerful components of this diet is that it helps reduce hunger. That's one of the biggest challenges for anyone trying to lose weight or control their medical condition, is eating the right quantity of food. But if you focus on protein in the diet, so think of the fish, the goat, the various protein sources we spoke about, or if you're vegan and vegetarian, tempeh, tofu, lupini beans, or one of these other options, and that makes up your protein component. And then you have a fibrous vegetable that we spoke about along with it, that often allows for people to feel full and to not feel hungry after their meal. This is one of the biggest challenges, Shlloka, for most people on a diet to lose weight, is they tend to want to overconsume foods. So an example is, let's say someone goes to buy food and they buy these packaged forms of, let's say, bread or other food components, and they'll eat the bread, but what they find is they're never full. They feel always hungry. They have one piece of bread, now they want two pieces of bread. Before they know it, maybe they ate three, maybe four pieces of bread. And what is the most powerful thing you can do is to reduce the foods in the diet that drive you to be hungry, that drive you out of the diet and reduce the benefits of the diet. So if you focus on real foods, protein, and then also fibrous vegetables, the overwhelming scientific evidence, especially the studies that we have shown, is that people will actually control their body weight just by eating the right foods and not trying to specifically restrict the amount of foods they're consuming. But don't overconsume on purpose. Try to focus on those food components first. If you are finding difficulties in losing weight on this diet, it's typically because you're consuming too much excess fat on the diet. So think of, when I have tea or coffee in the morning, am I adding a lot of extra coconut, a lot of extra cream into that? That's a lot of additional calories that oftentimes can mean that you're consuming calories early in the day when you don't necessarily need them. Or when you have palak paneer or other foods where you may add coconut or ghee, you can reduce the amount of ghee or coconut in those foods if you need to help you go further on your weight loss journey. So it's really about being conscious of the foods you're consuming. But again, the most important thing is to choose the right foods, because if you choose the right foods, you tend to actually lose weight without even trying, without that excess hunger. And that's what's most important for people and often the biggest struggle for them.
What should the frequency of my meals look like if I were to do the keto diet? Should I be consuming 3 meals, 4 meals, 5 meals, 1 meal?
You can consume any frequency of meal that you want. This is what's great about this dietary strategy. There's no secret number of foods you consume. But I will say this. People oftentimes, when they're trying to lose weight, will eat food when they're not actually hungry. And one of the best, let's say, health hacks or weight loss hacks you can do, and it's not really a hack, it's just evidence-based scientific strategy that someone can implement, is to not consume calories or food when you're not hungry. So a lot of times people will wake up first thing in the morning and they'll have a little bit of tea or coffee and they're not actually hungry. They don't need food. They may have been programmed in their head to think, I'm supposed to eat right now. But if they just sit down and are mindful of whether they're actually hungry, oftentimes the morning is when people are the least hungry. So that's a perfect window of time to not consume excess food. If your body's already not hungry, why give it food that you don't need? Your body's not craving it. Your body will tell you when you're hungry. So usually people can wake up and go for hours, especially if they have coffee or tea and focus on work or focus on the kids or whatever you're focused on in your life, because you have all these distractions and you're not hungry already. You can go a whole window of time without consuming any additional calories that will cause insulin to go up, which stores fat. And so in many ways, it's not about the frequency of meal. It's about allowing your body to tell you when you're hungry and avoiding consuming foods when your body isn't hungry.
Because we're usually told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's breaking fast. Is that true?
No. Breakfast can be an important meal of the day, but it is not necessary. In fact, there are many studies that have shown that a lot of people can benefit from avoiding food first thing in the morning or avoiding foods when they typically aren't hungry to begin with, which is usually in the morning. And so no, breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. Typically, breakfast can actually set people up for failure. If you're consuming high sugar, high carbohydrate based foods first thing in the morning, and they're very sweet, people tend to not only have a spike in glucose and insulin, but that sweet flavor causes this positive pleasure response in your brain. And what that does, Shlloka, is it teaches you to think, that tasted so good, I want more. And imagine you do that right when you wake up. The rest of the day, you're going to be fighting your hunger cues. Your body's going to be driving for more food because you set it up to fail first thing in the morning. So what I often encourage people to think of is focus on low carbohydrate based foods, whole foods with protein and fibrous vegetables, and the rest will do. The rest of the diet will work for you.
So would you say that eating timely meals is a myth? Because let's say today I felt like eating at 4 o'clock in the evening. Tomorrow I want to eat 2 meals. I feel hungry at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I want to have the second meal at 10 o'clock at night. Is that okay?
It's totally okay. But it is important to acknowledge as well the question you asked, which is tiny meals a myth? Yes, because there's no metabolic benefit to having one large meal that's, let's say, 2,000 calories versus 4 meals that are each 500 calories. It's going to have the same metabolic effect on the body, assuming it has the same type of food in it. But the most important thing is for you to set up a consistent routine that your body is used to. So you can eat at different times of the day, so long as it's consistent with the diet and the things we spoke about. But I would caution and say the more variability you have in your diet and your lifestyle routine, the more difficult it tends to be for most people to stick with it, because they're constantly they're hungry at different times. Your body's not used to a pattern. And it's kind of like riding a bike for the first time or driving a car for the first time. When you first do something new, it takes a lot of mental energy to learn how to do it and to get used to it. But eventually you're so used to it, you don't even think about it anymore. And the same thing applies to food patterns. When you think about when you're eating or how you're eating, if you can focus on a consistent routine that you get used to, it only helps you. It can only benefit you to have that consistency. But some people, Shlloka, don't have that option. And so they really have to focus on eating when they can. So just focus on the fundamental principles and it will work for you.
So keto diet is something that is a sustainable diet plan, or is it a temporary diet plan?
It's thought of Shlloka as a temporary diet plan because most people aren't necessarily eating that way. So they think about it as, well, this is different than what I do, so it must be only something I do for a short period of time. But we know based on psychology of food behavior and the science that if people change their food pattern over a couple weeks to maybe around a month, they begin to get used to this new way of eating, get used to this new way, this new pattern. And as long as you set it up to be sustainable and to be something that you can continue to do for your life. So again, choosing the foods that you enjoy that are consistent with a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet. That's going to allow you to have sustainability. We have known that this diet strategy has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's by no means a new diet or a new fad. It's been around for centuries, and it's been around for centuries treating and helping people not just to feel better and lose weight, but actually to treat diseases, obesity, diabetes, neurological disorders, and now emergent evidence on psychiatric disorders. So it's a sustainable approach, but you need to think about how to make it sustainable. Because if you only do it with the mindset that I'm only going to do this for 4 weeks, well, then it probably will only last 4 weeks because you thought about it as a 4-week plan. But if you think about it as, I'm going to sustain this for, let's say, 3 weeks, and I'm going to plan to do this for the next year, then you can build a plan that is consistent with you maintaining it over time. Focus on a sustained energy source in the form of fat and ketones and actually make you feel good. And that's what should be the focus for people when they think about this diet.
Right. So I can pursue this diet for the long haul. I can follow this permanently and it won't be a problem, right?
Correct. It needs to be, if you do it the correct way. But people often just go to the internet and search for ketogenic diet, and all they'll see is images of steaks, beef, bacon. And yes, some people can successfully do the diet that way, but that's not thinking about it for the long haul. You should be thinking about the vegetables you can have on this diet, the various forms of protein, both animal, fish, and plant-based proteins, tempeh, tofu, yogurts, forms of seeds or nuts that have protein in them. Let's say you have chia seeds, hemp seeds, lupini beans. These are all things that allow you to have an array of different dietary sources that give you micronutrient density, that make you feel healthy and like you're eating the right foods. That allows you to maintain this and to stay healthy on this approach.
We look at some rapid fire questions. What is a simple hack to enter ketosis faster?
Fastest and most rapid way to get into ketosis. It's very powerful, but it's something that you want to do with a plan. You want to make sure that you're planned out for, at least 1 to 3 days. Most of the benefits on a fast are seen within the first 3 days. You can go as much as 7 days, but there's very little benefit that extends beyond the 7-day window. So fasting is the fastest way. Another way to support this is drinking things like coffee or tea without any added sweetness or sugar in the morning. These things can often reduce hunger and allow people to get into reduced food intake, which reduced food intake, again, further supports getting into a fat burning or a ketogenic state. So those are the two most rapid ways to get into ketosis.
What are some other marketing myths that you could bust for us with respect to food?
When we think about things like saturated fat, is there a lot of data that says that saturated fat increases LDL, and LDL is associated with things like heart disease or cardiovascular disease? Yes, there is some evidence to show that, but that evidence is linked to having high saturated fat on high carbohydrate based diet. It's a totally different thing when we talk about low carbohydrate diets, ketogenic diets, and saturated fat, because even very healthy forms of fat like olive oil even have some saturated fat in it. So it's important to realize that a part of a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet probably involves some saturated fat intake, although you can swap a lot of animal foods for plant-based foods and reduce the saturated fat intake. But it's important to realize that the focus of saturated fat and the consequences of it are on the background of a high carbohydrate diet intake. So eating high carb and saturated fat together, yes, that has negative health consequences. However, it's much different when we talk about a low carbohydrate based diet, where by default, there's typically more saturated fat in these diets. And that's typically how the diet is composed, but the diet has tremendous health benefits to it. So that's also important to appreciate. Another thing that's important to acknowledge is that you can consume a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet as a vegan or vegetarian. People often think, oh, I can't do that. I'm vegan and vegetarian. It's a high meat diet. Well, no, you can have yogurts, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds. You can have things like tempeh or tofu, lupini beans. You can also supplement with protein on these other dietary strategies. But it is important when you're doing vegan and vegetarian, particularly vegan, to have things like B12 or zinc, and think about choline, which typically is in the form in eggs, because those are all essential to have in the diet. And you just want to be cautious of those and make sure that you're actually having sufficient quantity of those. But you can, I have seen ultra marathon athletes not only be low carbohydrate, but also vegan. And so it's completely doable. You just need to make sure that you are doing it in a way that is sustainable. And what that involves, Shlloka, is looking at the foods ahead of time that you can consume that are consistent with your diet, that are also compatible with a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet.
What are some of the most compatible oils with respect to the ketogenic diet? You mentioned ghee, you mentioned coconut oil. Are there any more such?
Sure. Most oils are fat-based. And so what I would say, all of them are fat-based, so all of them are compatible with a ketogenic diet, but there are healthier forms versus others. You don't want highly processed forms of oils. There's a possibility they may have some health consequences to them, may cause inflammation. And so what you want to focus on is natural forms of oils. Ghee, butter, and coconut oil are all a part of that. But if people want to focus on things like avocado oil, olive oil, macadamia nut oil, these are all
groundnut oil, sesame oil.
Yes. These are all oils that are totally compatible with the diet. They're also plant-based oils. But keep in mind, a lot of the things that you hear about when it comes to the health consequences of seed oils is highly refined processed forms of seed oils that people are concerned about. Okay, the ones that you might see at a fast food restaurant where they fry foods in. That's very different than a natural form of the same type of seed oils. So it's important for your audience to keep that in mind.
How much water should I be consuming if I'm on this diet?
I think having, around 6 to 7 glasses of water a day at a minimum, probably upwards of 10 is a typical recommendation. But I would also say that I don't think you need to overthink that. Your body tells you when you're thirsty and you can drink when you need to. But if you're having things like weakness, or you're having, issues or migraines or headaches, or you're running into other issues that are water related or hydration related, then you probably want to focus on getting more water intake. But for the most part, your body's going to tell you when you're thirsty, and you just consume water when your body tells you.
One mistake every keto beginner makes.
Ooh, that's a great one. Typically, they don't prepare ahead of time for the right type of foods to consume and how they think about consuming that food. So what someone can do to prevent making this mistake is to think about the foods they're already consuming, which of those are ketogenic, focus on those foods, and again, focus on the protein, the fibrous vegetables, and that is the primary things you should focus on. A lot of people will just assume that the certain foods are low carbohydrate and keto compatible, or they'll go to a store and they'll buy foods that say keto friendly or low carb or zero sugar, and they'll make the mistake of trusting what's on the food labels. Don't trust what's on the food labels. That's the common mistake, is people don't look ahead to ensure that what they're consuming is actually compatible with the diet, and many of which we've talked about earlier on this podcast.
What are some of the exercise and the lifestyle tips that you could recommend someone who was on a ketogenic diet?
Lifestyle strategies that people could consider are things that are critical to health alongside nutrition. I often think about health in 3 pillars. The first pillar is nutrition. We know that nutrition is the primary cause of the obesity epidemic across the world. And if you don't fix nutrition, you'll probably never fix obesity. So that's number 1. Number 2 is exercise. Exercise is one of the most powerful lifestyle habits that someone can have. When you do a hard bout of exercise, whether it be running, walking, swimming, lifting weights for at least 30 minutes or more. In fact, the more you do, the more benefits you get. You can see benefits that last 24 to 48 hours, reducing insulin levels, increasing insulin sensitivity, better sleep, less inflammation. These are critical for overall health. But beyond that, the third major pillar is the one that's often most ignored, and that's sleep. Sleep is so important to overall health. And people who get poor sleep tend to have poor choices. They tend to eat more poorer foods, sweeter foods, foods that are typically not as healthy. It also makes it harder to be motivated to exercise. So one of the key things is to ensure that you're getting good sleep. And how do you do that? Well, one of the first things you can do is go outside first thing in the morning and actually get sunlight. Okay, actually set your what they call circadian clock. Going outside and getting sunlight is one of the best ways to ensure that your body hormone and 24-hour window is aligned with light and dark cycles. Sunlight going up, sunlight going down. That's one of the easiest and cheapest, because it's free, Shlloka, to do this, lifestyle habits. But beyond that, it's also what you do not just when you first wake up, but at the end of the day. So reducing the light exposure that you have, reducing the amount of light, not just from, let's say, light in the room, but also from phones and TVs or televisions and other devices, because they send a certain type of light called blue light into the eyes. And the blue light in the eyes stimulates the retina to actually alert wakeness. And so by looking at these lights right before bed, typically the hour or two before bed, it triggers your brain to think time for being awake. And so it's about first thing in the morning, going outside, getting sunlight, setting your circadian clock. And then at the end of the day, reducing the amount of light in your environment and focusing on things like, let's say, reading a book or doing things that are low activity and low stress that allow your body to rest. Because sleep is often about resting your mind, not just your body.
Are there any meats which are better and help with the process of ketosis faster than the others?
There is no specific meat that accelerates getting into a ketogenic diet and to switch away from sugar to fat. But eating meats that are consistent with this diet are going to help you sustain not just getting there, but maintaining there. Again, meats like beef, chicken thighs, lamb, goat, pork, cheeses like paneer and blue cheddar, goat, Swiss cheese. You can have bacon and sausage. They do have higher fat content, but you can do things like cottage cheese, charcuterie, or other meats. If someone wanted to have, vegetarian, they may do Greek yogurt, curd. We already mentioned cheese, but also vegan like tofu, tempeh, the various seeds we spoke about, hemp, pumpkin, chia seeds, nutritional yeast. These are all foods that are allowing individuals, including fish, tuna, salmon, shrimp, shellfish. These foods are all going to be reasonably equivalent in their benefits on a ketogenic diet. But I will say that there are things people can do to help accelerate getting into a ketogenic diet, like switching away from things like a fast or other types of changes in dietary patterns that are very abrupt. But I always caution people in doing that unless they're very committed to those approaches, because you can't maintain a fast for forever. Fast will accelerate getting into ketosis much quicker. In fact, there have been many biblical texts that describe the health benefits of a fast. Now, Shlloka, you may be wondering, well, is there actually evidence that shows that fasting helps with things like brain issues or other ailments? Yes. Now there's emergent evidence that fasting has robust medicinal and therapeutic qualities. But a ketogenic diet matches the physiology of fasting. But the difference between a ketogenic diet and fasting is that the fasting has 0 calories, whereas ketogenic diet allows for you to just maintain calories over an extended period of time. And that's what allows it to be a sustainable approach for your life.
Namaskaram, I'm Shlloka. We've spent a lot of time in developing this product, which is the authentic A2 Gir Cow Ghee by the brand name Yogic Organic. We've spent several years to bring this product to you. My endeavor was to bring to you the real goodness of authentic A2 Gir Cow Ghee, and here it is. Pre-orders are now open. To order, just call or WhatsApp on +91 8493 863427. So ketogenic diet is basically low carb, high fat. If we look at certain societies which are a centenarian society, such as the Okinawa in Japan, they consume a lot of carbohydrates. So they are on high carbohydrates, they're on low protein, they're on low fat. Isn't this counterintuitive then?
This is a really great question because many people will look at what they call the blue zones, or where people live to over 100 years old, or centenarians, as you reference. Do they typically eat diets that are higher in carbohydrates? Yes, but that's more of a cultural component to their lifestyle. These individuals also maintain normal body weight. They have regular physical activity. They aren't eating excess amounts of food, and they're typically free of disease. Those latter components that I spoke about, physical activity, maintaining body weight, free of disease, those three components are the most evidence-based ways to live a long period of time. Additionally, these blue zones or centenarian populations also have genetic components that allow them to live for extended periods of time. That doesn't mean that because the way they ate is inherently allowing them to live to 100 years of age. This diet has actually never been implemented in these same populations to determine whether it's actually their diet that does this or not. But this diet, such as a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet, is one of the most evidence-based ways to lose weight and maintain weight, to also allow for individuals to not over-consume on the diet, and has been shown to prevent, manage, and even reverse chronic metabolic diseases like diabetes. So if you want to get those three components that are actually shown to allow people to live to 100 years of age, you can't change your genetics, but you can eat a diet that allows you to maintain normal body weight. You can engage in physical activity, and you can eat a diet that allows you to, if you do have a disease, prevent or reverse it, or just prevent it in the first place. And the ketogenic low carbohydrate diet is one of the most evidence-based ways to do those things.
The keto diet is also about consuming high amounts of protein. Does that become problematic because there are studies to show that consuming high levels of protein is linked to cancer?
This is also a really important question. I actually studied cancer for over a decade ago, for many, many years. And there is a lot of evidence that shows low protein intake has an anti-cancer effect. The data that shows that high protein intake causes any form of cancer, there is no data like that. The only data that suggests that someone would get cancer from eating higher protein is large population studies that let's take everyone in India and let's look at the way they eat. Okay. And the people who tend to eat more, let's say protein, have a higher incidence of cancer. That doesn't mean, Shloka, that high protein intake causes cancer. It may be that the people who eat higher protein also have other lifestyle habits that actually cause cancer. Let's say that they're eating low fiber based diets. Let's say they're not physically active. Let's say they're consuming all foods in excess in the diet and they're gaining excess weight. Those are real factors that actually cause increased risk for cancers. Excess protein doesn't cause that. There is no evidence that it causes it, but there is evidence that low protein diets have an anti-cancer effect. But I'll caution people with this, because if you eat a low protein diet, that can cause potential issues around muscle mass. And one of the most important predictors of if someone not only lives a long period of time, but actually has a functional high quality life is maintaining muscle mass. So would you want to live to 120 years of age if you were frail and couldn't move for 60 of those years? Or would you want to live to, let's say, 80, 90 years of age and you were functional, could lift things, move around, get out and go meet your friends for the entirety of your life? Think about that, because when you choose a diet that's very low in protein, it can put you at risk for a disease called sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass. And that's one of the biggest risk factors for people in older age for early death, which is the loss of muscle mass and the inability to function later in life, because function and movement and exercise are critical for a life well lived over centuries or over decades and decades up to a century.
What about poultry? There are studies to also show that increased poultry consumption is also linked to cancer. And keto is predominantly about consuming non-vegetarian food?
So great point. So there is evidence that shows that certain types of foods, poultry being one of them, dairy can another form of that can be one of them. But again, it's less to do with that specific food and more so to do with what is happening with people who tend to consume those type of foods. So you can consume things like chicken and other forms of poultry at the right quantities, not in excess, and do the right lifestyle habits around that, and people are able to live a wonderful, long-lived life. It's more so the choices that people who tend to eat those foods on average tend to do. So for example, in the United States, people who consume more beef, more poultry, more protein-based foods also tend to be heavier and be obese. And so we know that obesity is probably the biggest and most common risk factors for most of the major chronic diseases we have in our society. And so yes, if you have a disease is what causes early mortality or shortened life expectancy more than anything else will. And so that's really what is causing it. It's not any specific food. There are powerful foods that you can make up a diet, but no one food is going to be the cause or lack thereof of a well-lived life. It's about the entire diet and the other components outside of diet, such as exercise, such as social interaction. Shlloka, we're sitting here talking and having a conversation. This is good for both of our brain health, okay? Other people should be getting out, meeting, mingling, being around their family. These are things we know contribute to a longer life. It isn't any one food that would cause that. It's about all the components of a diet that make up the total diet over years and years and years, and the other components we spoke about as well that make someone healthy, free of disease, and have a high quality of life.
What are some of the fruits that can be consumed and can't be consumed very quickly if someone were to do the keto diet?
Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, these berry forms of fruit are high in fiber content, have low sugar content, and consuming in the right quantities, let's say about a third of a cup per meal, is totally consistent with a ketogenic diet. However, oranges, bananas, mangoes, these type of foods cause a very large glucose spike and insulin spike as well, and are difficult to control glucose and insulin levels with. These don't make these foods unhealthy, but just not a food that's going to allow you to sustain this fat burning mode that you want to shift from sugar to fat. Consuming high glucose, even fruits, bananas, mangoes, apples, pineapples, these type of foods spike glucose, spike insulin, and ultimately may make it difficult to maintain a ketogenic diet or a state of fat burning.
So I was saying that about 25% of the population world over has tried the keto diet at some point in their lives. And I presume for the most part, it's incorrect because people often Google and they get a diet plan. I tried doing one such plan one time and it backfired because I developed a severe bout of acne and I had severe constipation. And I didn't know at that point that I could consume, let's say, vegetables or fruits, which I know now of. But I think there are many mistakes that people on this path may end up making. And if you could be kind enough to clarify a few of those.
Sure. So there are some common preventable and not only preventable, but predictable pitfalls that people get into when starting this diet. One is poor diet formulation and what you described yourself. And this could be because people are accidentally consuming too many carbohydrates. If they're curious, they can go to an AI software and say, is this food I'm consuming high in carbohydrates and consistent with a ketogenic diet? And you could easily find that out nowadays, much more so than you could have in the past. Many people often get into a state of caloric restriction, which if you're losing weight, that's perfect. That's wonderful because you want to lose excess weight, and being in a caloric restriction allows you to do that.
Can you explain this terminology, please?
Sure. So a caloric restriction means you are consuming less calories than your body is burning to sustain its energy. When you do that, your body has to then pull its own tissue in the form of fat and other tissue to maintain the energy needs of the body. So when someone goes into a caloric restriction if they're not eating the right type of diet, they're eating maybe still a lot of sugary based foods, too much sweetness, and they're still trying to get a lot of food, they're going to be hungry. And so they're going to often reach for foods, maybe not the ideal foods on this diet. And so people accidentally caloric restrict on this diet sometimes, which is a good thing. And you do want that if you're trying to lose weight. But if you are not trying to lose weight and you're trying to do it for something independent of weight loss, you want to be careful not to restrict your calories. Another thing is people accidentally typically protein restrict. So it's important to actually get sufficient quantities of protein. You can do up to 2.2 grams per pound of body weight. That has been shown to support optimal levels of muscle mass and also recovery. And so you can consume up to that. You don't need to consume that much. You can do 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. But too low a protein will make it harder to be less hungry. Protein is very important for helping reduce hunger cues in the brain and also to help support muscle mass. So you don't want to accidentally restrict that. You want to make sure your diet is composed of healthy forms of protein. And another component of pitfall is that, people are often nutritionally imbalanced, meaning they may consume too much of one particular food and they're not diversifying their food options. They think, oh, well, this diet, I can only eat these certain types of foods. When in reality, you can eat an array of different foods, and you want to, because it gives you different micronutrients and phytonutrients from different types of foods, vegetables, meats, fish, cheese of various types that are going to help sustain a adequate nutrient dense diet. But if you realize that almost every food you consume could be made in a healthier ketogenic low carb fashion, you realize that you can have these same foods and often make them healthier. And there's a website called All I Dream About Is Food, where there's a whole list of recipes where people can literally go and find cookies, donuts, cakes, breads, and you can make all of these low carb. I made a non-bread before. I've made various forms of bread or cakes for my birthday that have allowed me to eat low carbohydrate and ketogenic, not feel these up and down in energy and feel like I need to take a nap afterwards. That's extremely important for people to realize. Now, I'm not encouraging people to consume a lot of breads or a lot of cakes or cookies by any means, but know that if you want to have those foods, you can still have those foods without the sugar and insulin spikes. But it's about understanding that those foods exist and planning ahead. The second biggest preventable and predictable pitfall is not preparing for the change your body is going to go through when you shift away from the high carb diet. Now, what does that mean? Well, when you shift from the sugar burning state to a fat burning state, your body is changing all its machinery. It's moving away from its dependence on sugar and slowly building the various components, like enzymes are changing, cellular changes, these metabolites in the body are starting to move around, and you're going through what we call fat adaptation or keto adaptation. And what you want to do is during that period of time, one of the common changes is that your body is no longer holding a lot of excess water or sodium. Well, why is that happening? Because insulin is what's holding a lot of that water and sodium. And when insulin comes down on the diet, people lose water weight quite rapidly for the first usually 2 to 6 weeks. And so understand that when you have a lot of sodium loss or salt loss, it's called a diuretic effect. You want to actually consume more sodium, particularly in the first 2 to 4 weeks while you're still in this adaptation phase. Because sometimes you might hear, oh, I got like a headache. I feel tired or lethargic or fatigued. And what they can do is almost all of those symptoms, Shlloka, are explained by a sodium deficiency. And so it's important to consume somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 milligrams of sodium while on the diet. That helps people sustain the mineral levels they need on the diet and helps them be able to bridge the transition from when they first start the diet to when their body fully adapts to this lower sugar, lower insulin form of the diet.
What is one hack to lose weight faster?
Setting up a diet plan that is whole foods, protein focused, and fibrous vegetables, removing processed, refined, packaged foods from your diet. And that often by default allows people to volitionally reduce the food consumption in their diet. And there's no better way, no better hack there is out there than allowing your body to work for you, not against you. So focusing on those key strategies allow people to do that.
There are lots of packaged foods in the name of healthy foods, right? So I know we're not talking about millets here, but for example, in India, you do get millet cookies and you get these baked jawar crackers. What would you have to say about those?
All right, so I'm going to look direct into this and say this. Food companies are not here to make you healthy. Food companies are here to trick you. They want to trick you to consume as much food as possible of their product. They want you to buy more of it because that makes them more money. And oftentimes they will include food ingredients in there to make it taste better to your brain. What happens when you consume that food? Not only does it typically spike glucose and insulin more, but it also tricks your brain into wanting to eat more of it. That is not going to help you. And those food companies are not interested in your health. They're interested in how much money they can make. So the number one thing that you can do on your health journey is to not trust a food company or a packaged food to be healthy for you, but to actually follow the fundamentals of a healthy diet and only consume foods that actually support that. Don't trust food companies. They're not here to help you.
What about a protein powder or a protein bar? Is that a problem?
I think protein powders and protein bars are probably one of the healthiest food supplements that someone can consume. And the reason I say that is not inconsistent with what I just said. You need to be careful that protein bars and protein powders don't have added sugar or things in them that aren't good for your health. You want to focus on a protein powder that can support getting the optimal amount of protein. You know, the highest amount of protein that's optimal for muscle mass and function is 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. But oftentimes, let's say if you're on a vegan or vegetarian diet, this is a little harder to get sufficient amounts of protein. Or let's say you're exercising at higher volumes and make sure you're getting sufficient protein intake. So you can consume powdered protein in the form of pea protein, egg white protein, whey protein, depending on if you are staying vegan, vegetarian, or have a dairy allergy or not. These are all protein powders are going to support getting optimal protein intake. Also important to realize that one of my close colleagues, Michael Ormsby, is a world expert on protein intake at night. And what his research has showed is that when individuals consume protein right before bed, it doesn't have any negative effects on sleep, but instead can actually promote getting better body composition, increasing energy expenditure at night. And these are all things that everyone wants when they consume food. So having protein powder is actually one of the few supplements that actually can be beneficial for someone's health. Same with a protein bar. But let me caution your audience here. Most protein bars are not healthy. Most protein bars are essentially candy packaged up as a health protein bar. So be careful about the protein bars you're consuming, that they don't have these hidden ingredients in them that cause sugar spikes. So even though a food may say 0 sugar, maybe they put maltitol, maltodextrin, a wheat, a grain, a barley, a syrup, honey, agave, or one of these other foods that still spikes glucose levels and spikes insulin levels and are not actually benefiting you on your health journey. So be very careful. I've actually tested most of the major protein bars on the market, and most of them actually spike glucose and insulin to some various degree. Very rare can you find a protein bar that's actually health focused, but there are some that exist, and those are the ones that are very low in carbohydrate, don't have sugar additives or sugar alternatives that have the same effect as sugar, and help promote higher protein intake, which can reduce hunger and promote muscle mass. And that should be what you focus on when it comes to protein supplements.
Is the keto diet different for an individual who's wishing to, let's say, reverse diabetes vis-a-vis an individual who wants to lose weight?
Yes, but not much. So if, let's say someone is, let's say, obese or have type 2 diabetes, their focus is going to be on weight loss. That's the primary focus. In fact, most people in the general population are probably focused on doing this diet because they want to lose weight and look better and also feel better. Well, if they're on a diet, low carbohydrate based diet, then you want to have that caloric restriction or reduce the food intake. So you don't want to think about having to consume excess amounts of food to make up the diet. You actually want to consume less foods. And so being very mindful in consuming less foods to support your weight loss, eating foods that don't make you feel hungry afterwards, make you feel satiated, make you feel well afterwards. That's really a high focus for things like obesity and type 2 diabetes. If you have a disease like type 1 diabetes, the focus is not on weight loss, at least not for most people. It's on glucose control. And so you can have higher protein forms of this diet and not worry about things like and be less focused on weight loss. Neurological disorders or psychiatric conditions, let's say cognitive decline as you age, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, seizures. Migraines is another one as well. But to take it a step further, there is also things to think about, let's say, versus men and women. So one of the key differences between men and women is really body size. So the diet is very similar for both men and women, ensuring you have adequate intake into a diverse diet, but women may require less calories and ultimately less protein because they typically aren't as heavy. Another thing that often arises, particularly when people are thinking about this as they age, is should I be consuming a diet different than someone who's doing this who's younger? And I would say yes. As you age, the focus is much more about oftentimes, if you already are normal body weight, brain function. And so ensuring that you are, again, producing ketone bodies because of its key role in the brain is also important. So those are not only disease specific, sex specific, but age specific things that people want to consider. But the fundamentals of the diet, Shlloka, are very similar. It's just how you slightly tweak them to maximize the benefit based on maybe a condition you have, the age you have, or whether you're male or female.
Are there some telling signs to indicate that the diet is working for me or the diet is not working for me?
Sure. When someone does the diet, one of the first things they need to anticipate is that there are going to be some rapid changes with the diet. Typically, if you do the diet correctly, as we're talking about here on this platform, is they're going to see drops in glucose levels, drops in insulin levels, and they're probably going to see some quick reductions in body weight, not just from fat, but also from water weight. And so these are typical telltale signs that someone is doing the diet correctly, but that may last for 4+ weeks. And if they continue to lose weight, it'll last for even longer. So that's one of the quickest ways to see that you're doing the diet correctly. But high blood pressure is typically a problem. High triglycerides are commonly a problem. And these are other things that you can assess to see if the diet is in fact helping you reach your goals by checking your blood pressure, getting a blood test and checking your triglycerides. That's something that's very important because we've seen even in emergent evidence for like psychiatric conditions like clinical depression, for moderate to severe depression. There's a study that came out 2 days ago that had showed that you can actually do the ketogenic diet and actually put 88% of the patients with moderate to severe depression into remission. So they no longer had clinical signs of depression. Their anxiety reduced. 88% had reduced anxiety. All of them had a reduction in what they call emotional numbness. So this lack of pleasure or emotional responsiveness to life. That was reduced or improved for all patients. But improvements happened every week over a 12-week period. And sometimes at an individual level, some patients improved and didn't improve, improved and didn't improve, but over the duration of the entire diet, they continued to get better. But it might not look like a linear or straight line. It might look like up, down, up, down, up, down, but over time they're making progress. Well, Shlloka, I think one thing that's really important for your audience to realize is that if someone were to consider a ketogenic diet, there's certainly a lot of myths out there. There's certainly a lot of information that's wrong out there. It's important to find a trusted expert who has studied this diet, who is an expert on this, and maybe even done it themselves. And I think that will help people find the right resources on their journey. And following the key habits and strategies we've implemented and described here can be a very powerful strategy, frankly, on any diet you consume. It's a very powerful diet. It has gotten a lot of popularity for that reason, but it's important to do it the right way and to follow a lot of the outlined and the strategies that we've put out here on this podcast to help people on their journey. And everyone, it's important to realize as well that when you go on a health journey and you're trying something new, it's important to try. A lot of times as scientists or as researchers or as individuals helping consult major groups of people implement these diets, one of the common pitfalls that people run into is they just don't even try in the first place. They assume it's not for me, it can't work for me, or I can't do that. And in reality, you can. You can do it. It can work for you, but you have to try. You have to take the first step. And if I could share with your audience anything that's important, it's to try. It's to take the first step and see if it works for you. Give it a real try, at least 4 weeks of implementing this strategy, and see if it benefits your health. It's okay if it doesn't. Find something that does, but you'll never know until you try. So it's important to try in the first case. And that only takes the first step. Just try to take the first step.
Great. Dr. Andrew Koutnik, I can't thank you enough. This was such a wisdom-packed masterclass, and thank you so much for co-creating this conversation with me. I had a lot of fun, and I think there are huge amounts of takeaways for our viewers as well. So thank you.
Absolute honor to speak to you and your audience today.
Thank you. In case you'd like to be a part of our online and in-person yoga, diet, and spiritual programs, you can join our WhatsApp group below, where we post all our upcoming programs and give free tips on health, diet, and lifestyle.